Hey everyone. Tonight we're going to take a slow, dreamy walk through a version of history that you definitely won't envy. Imagine this. You're no longer in bed, no soft pillows, no warm blankets. Instead, you wake up in the year 1325 in the middle of medieval Europe. And your mattress, it's just a rotten straw sack. You can feel the sharp but dry straw rubbing against your back, and there's definitely something crawling in your hair. Maybe just a flea. Or a few. Probably a few. They live here for free. Of course, you're not alone. Your family is crammed into a single wooden hut, sleeping like sardines, along with a few goats, a chicken, and a cousin who refuses to move out. Privacy. That's not a medieval concept. You share every moment of life with the people around you, even the noises they make while they sleep. There's snoring. There's coughing. Someone mumbles about lost potatoes in their dreams. You hear it all, right next to your ear, all night long. And before you can stretch, you hear the church bells ringing in the distance. That's your alarm clock. It doesn't play soothing tunes. It just clangs, loud and heavy, reminding you that your day has officially begun. Historians still debate how common these communal sleeping arrangements were. Some say entire families actually slept together in one big bed. Others say it's an exaggeration created by later moralists trying to make the past sound worse. But archaeological finds of tiny one-room houses suggest that, yes, personal space wasn't a big priority. When you sit up, your back creaks like an old wooden door. You're 22, but in medieval terms, basically middle-aged. Your knees feel like they belong to someone twice your age. When you put your feet down, they hit the cold ground. Or is it mud? It's hard to tell. It rained last night, and the roof leaks. Again. Your toes hit something that could be chicken shit, or goat shit, or both. Honestly, it's best not to read too much into it. The air is cold and damp. Your breath makes small clouds in front of you, but at least it's proof that you're still alive. Congratulations. You've survived another night in medieval Europe. Not everyone does. Plague, bad food, and random accidents always take their toll. But for now, you're still breathing. You look around the room. There's no glass window to look through, just a small hole in the wall covered with a piece of cloth. There's no light switch to turn on. There's no fireplace humming softly in the background. The walls are made of wood and mud, with cracks big enough to throw a chicken through. That's no exaggeration. They've actually tested it in reconstruction projects. Some chickens have survived. You smell the smoke from last night's fire, mixed with old sweat, goat hair, and something you really hope isn't mold. But you're not entirely sure. Maybe mold. Probably. At this point, you might be wondering if things could get worse. The answer is yes, much worse. But don't worry, we'll take it slow. Remember, this isn't a video game where you can pause your medieval experience. You can't click on a menu and choose better mattress or switch to lunch. There's no reset button. You're living here now. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I do here. Seriously, no pressure. And while you're at it, leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fun to see someone from around the world join us. Now, turn down the lights, turn on the fan for some soothing background music, and enjoy tonight's journey together. Sitting on the edge of your straw mattress, scratching the flea bites behind your knees, you hear the morning sounds of the medieval quarter coming to life. A rooster crows, though it's probably been up for hours. Someone outside is chopping wood, the sound of an axe hitting a log echoing in the misty air. Your stomach growls, but breakfast isn't here yet until you've taken care of something else first. Nature is calling, bustling, and this is when the day truly begins. Your day has just begun, but nature is not waiting. You need to go to the bathroom. In the modern world, it is simple. Go to the bathroom, close the door, flush when you are done, maybe light a candle or spray some scented water if you want. But this is not the modern world. This is 1325, where the bathroom is a luxury that has not yet been invented. There is no porcelain seat waiting for you, no handles to pull, no soft tissue paper within reach. Instead, you pick up the family bucket of water, the same one everyone used last night. It is by the door, almost full. It smells exactly as you expected, only worse. There is a reason no one sits too close to this corner. You carry it carefully outside, hoping not to spill it. But to be honest, you spill some anyway. Coming out of the muddy alley, you throw the water straight into the street. But before you do that, you have to shout Gardaloo. That's the medieval version of watch out down there, an old French phrase that literally means watch out for water. Except in this case, it's not water. It's a peculiar mix of last night's dinner and digestive aftermath, but no one really moves fast enough to avoid it. Your neighbors just accept it as part of life. Some historians argue that medieval streets weren't always so dirty. They say town records show that there were street cleaners, and that people were required by law to keep their front steps clean. But then again, those same records contain complaints about people throwing potties out their windows for hundreds of years. Archaeologists have found layers of compacted waste in ancient streets, proving that a lot of it did end up right where you're standing right now. If you live in a larger town, there's probably a public toilet somewhere, a wooden bench with holes in it, set over a pit. But that's not much better. You'll sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, with absolutely no privacy, chatting about the weather while pretending not to breathe too deeply. Ventilation. What a joke. The stench in these places is legendary. Back in your little village, there are no toilets, no outhouses, just a corner of the yard if you're lucky, or a communal bucket if you're unlucky, and most people don't have any. You might wonder why not hide behind a bush. First, it's cold. Second, bushes aren't always available. In some places, the woods belong to the lord of the manor, and misuse of trees can technically be illegal. There are stories, although historians still debate their veracity, of peasants being fined or punished for defecating on land that wasn't theirs. But the waste had to go somewhere, right? So it ran into the streets, mixing with animal excrement and bits of last night's stew. It formed nasty little rivers that ran around town, especially when it rained. If you were lucky, the waste would flow downhill. If you were unlucky, it would pool right in front of your house. In some places, people tried to dig drainage ditches, but they quickly clogged. Others put stepping stones over the mud. That's where the phrase, crossing the gutter, comes from. By the way, you literally had to jump over the disgusting mess just to visit your neighbors. You wiped yourself with whatever was handy, maybe a handful of straw, a piece of cloth, or a clump of moss if it was spring. Toilet paper wouldn't exist for hundreds of years. Some households used a special stick with a cloth tied to the end, which they rinsed after each use in the same bucket. Hygiene is relative. Don't think too much about it. By now, you're probably starting to miss your bathroom at home. The bathroom with its clean towels, warm water, and lavender-scented soap. But this was 1325. Soap was expensive and rare. And even when it was available, people didn't always use it. Many believed that washing too often would make you sick. Doctors of the time, who were also barbers, surgeons, and sometimes dentists, warned that opening up your pores would allow disease to enter. So people covered their skin with a protective layer of dirt, thinking it would be safer. Of course, there were public baths, but they were controversial. The church often condemned them as places of sin, and rumors spread about what went on behind their damp curtains. In some towns, bathhouses were closed altogether, blamed for the spread of plague and immorality. Historians still debate how often people actually bathed in the Middle Ages. Some say it was weekly, others say it was annually. It probably depended on where you lived and how much water you could carry. You set the bucket by the door. Now, no running water, no need to flush. Everything is close to home, sometimes uncomfortably close. Your stomach growls again, louder this time. Time for breakfast, something like that. But don't get too excited. The menu is, limited, to put it bluntly. You sit down by a small fire in the middle of the hut, hoping for breakfast, though that might be a bit generous. There's no sizzling bacon, no buttered toast, and certainly no coffee. In fact, coffee won't be available in Europe for centuries. Right now, all you have is a wooden bowl of something called pottage. It's a thick, grayish mixture, somewhere between soup and wallpaper paste. It's been simmering in the same pot for days, sometimes weeks. Ingredients are added and then removed as they become available. If you're lucky, today's batch might contain a few grains of barley, maybe a carrot if it's in season, and maybe a beetle or two. Though you don't mind. More protein, right? You stir the bowl slowly. The smell is familiar, earthy and slightly sour. This wasn't a fresh meal, it was more like a living stew, constantly evolving. New vegetables were added as old ones melted away. The bones held their flavor until they were gone. Sometimes the pot was cooked so thoroughly that people joked that it had been simmering since last year's festival, whether that was true or not. Historians debate. Some say the pot was replenished daily. Others say it was an ongoing experiment in the durability of the dish. Next to your bowl of soup is your loaf of bread. It's not the soft, spongy bread you know today. There's no buttery crust or sweet aroma. Medieval bread is dense, dark, and often hard as a rock. You don't really cut it, you gnaw on it, like a dog gnawing on an old bone, if you're lucky. It's made from rye or barley. If you're less lucky, it's stretched with things like ground chestnuts or even sawdust. Not because anyone liked the taste, but because wheat was expensive and scarce. Poor families added whatever they could find to make the dough rise better. There are even stories of bread being baked with clay or chalk mixed in, though scholars debate how common that was. You take a bite and try not to chip your teeth. Your jaw aches from the effort, but at least you're eating. That's more than some people can say. During lean years, peasants sometimes went weeks without food, surviving on whatever they could find. Remember, you weren't guaranteed 3 meals a day in medieval Europe. Sometimes, you weren't even guaranteed one. Now it's time for a drink. No orange juice, no oat milk latte. Instead, you're sipping beer. That's right, beer for breakfast. But don't imagine a frothy pint from your favorite pub. This is small beer, low in alcohol, but with a high survival value. The water around here is not safe. The stream may look clean, but upstream, someone may have dumped a chamber pot into it. Or worse, there are decomposing animal carcasses just out of sight. Brewing beer, even weak beer, requires boiling the water, which kills most dangerous bacteria. It's safer than drinking straight from a bucket at a well. Even children drank small beer. There was no age limit when the risk of dysentery was so high. Some scholars believe that people didn't actually drink as much beer as legend has it, but archaeological studies of medieval household waste often find brewing equipment in even the smallest homes. So there's a good chance you're drinking beer right now, maybe warm, maybe bland, but safer than water. You chew another bite of bread, trying to ignore the faint scent of ash from last week's fire. Your soup slurps and sloshes as you swallow, and you try not to think about how many people have stirred the pot. No one washed their hands today, or yesterday, or maybe ever. You might wonder why people don't eat fresh fruit or vegetables. Well, it's seasonal. If it's fall, you might eat an apple or a handful of berries. But winter and early spring, forget it. Your diet is whatever's left in the cellar: turnips, onions, and dried beans if you're lucky. Sometimes people store grain too long and it grows a fungus called ergot. That's a real problem. Eat ergot-infected bread and you start hallucinating. Some call it St. Anthony's fire because it sears your body in waves of pain, convulsions, and hallucinations. Historians still debate how common ergot poisoning really was, but medieval records are full of strange stories of villages dancing uncontrollably or seeing demons after eating spoiled bread. Meat, well, don't expect it. That was for special occasions, maybe Sundays or holidays. And even then, you only got a little, unless you were a member of the nobility. Hunting was illegal for peasants. The forests belonged to the Lord, not you. If you were caught poaching rabbits or trapping deer, the punishment could be, but even cheese can get moldy pretty quickly. You scrape off the green bits and eat the rest. That's how it goes. When you've finished your meal, or at least stopped pretending to enjoy it, you lean back against the wall of the hut. You're full, in the medieval sense of the word, meaning you're no longer hungry, but you're not energized or satisfied. Breakfast didn't fuel you for the day, it just gave you something to chew on. Outside, the sun is high. It's time to get dressed. Time to get dressed, to be exact, because you slept in your clothes. There's only one outfit for you, and it's about to get a lot itchier. You brush the breadcrumbs off your tunic, not that it makes a difference. The tunic has been with you for months, even years, and it shows. It used to be wool, but now it feels like something between fabric and memory. The color has long since faded to a mottled grayish brown, and its texture is like sandpaper left out in the rain. You run your hands through the seams, finding tiny holes where moths have eaten, and stains that come from nowhere, forming permanent memories of meals, accidents, and times gone by. You don't change your clothes because you can't. These are your clothes, a set of clothes for everything: sleeping, working, praying, and even, eventually, dying. If you were rich, which you weren't, you might own a second tunic, maybe even a cloak. But for a peasant, owning two sets of clothes was like owning two houses. It was unusual. Your tunic was made of coarse wool, sometimes lined with linen if you were lucky, but often not. It was itchy, stiff, and smelled of stale tobacco smoke, sweat, and the dirt you lay on. Underwear optional. Some people wore nothing at all, which sounds horrible to you but was quite common in the 14th century. If you wore anything underneath, it was probably a long linen shirt, but linen was expensive, and washing was a pain. You had no soap, just ashes and lye. Some people washed their clothes with sand, which sounds like a smart idea until you remember that sand is not gentle. It wears out the fabric faster than time. No set washing day, it was horrible. You had to carry buckets of water from a well or river, boil it over a fire, and spend hours washing your clothes on a wooden board, hoping to get rid of the toughest stains. And when you finally got them clean, you hung them up to dry and prayed for no rain. Rain meant mold, and mold meant you had to start all over again, but this time with thicker, wetter fabric. Even when you did wash your clothes, there was no iron to press them, no cupboard to hang them in. You just piled them in a corner of the room, where the occasional hen nested. Your clothes weren't just clothes, they were part of your personal environment. They were covered with fleas and lice that lived in your bed, and those little insects rode on you like kings in a chariot. Historians still debate how bad medieval hygiene really was. Some scholars argue that peasants bathed and washed their clothes more often than we think. They point to church records and public bathhouses that show that washing was not unheard of. But on the other hand, archaeological digs have uncovered lice combs in nearly every grave, and personal letters often complain of itching and sores from insect bites. The truth is probably somewhere in between. People wanted to be clean, but the tools to stay clean were not readily available. Look at your shoes, if you have any. They are not sneakers, nor are they boots with memory foam. They are hand-stitched leather, often recycled from old shoes, sometimes patched so many times that you can't tell where the original sole began. They have no arch support. They are not waterproof. They are just enough to keep sharp rocks from cutting into your feet. Sometimes. Most people don't even bother wearing shoes, especially in warm weather. You walk barefoot through mud, through animal dung, over sharp rocks, and through puddles you don't want to name. Thick calluses form on your feet, but even calluses don't prevent infection. A small cut can turn into a festering sore in a matter of days. If it gets worse, you could lose a toe, or a foot, or your life. And yet, you dress the same every day. You pull your itchy tunic over your head, tie a simple belt around your waist, and check that the sleeves are rolled up high enough to stay out of the way during the workday. There's no mirror in the closet. There's no need to double-check your appearance before leaving the house. You already know exactly what you look like: tired, dirty, and itchy. It's a medieval aesthetic. Fashion isn't about trends or colors, it's about function and survival. You wear what you have until it falls apart, then you patch it, when even that is no longer possible. You cut the cloth into rags or use it to plug cracks in the walls of your house to keep out the cold. Nothing is wasted because everything is too hard to replace. Do you remember? There's an itch that's been lingering for days, maybe weeks. It could be a rash, it could be lice, it could be fleas, or it could be something worse, like scabies, the medieval version of the friendship bracelet, passed from person to person through sharing beds and rooms. You think about going to the doctor, but you know better. Doctors cost money, and even if you have the money, their treatments usually involve rubbing herbs on your skin, chanting prayers, or slashing your body with a dull knife to balance your fluids. Some say medieval medicine wasn't as bad as modern myths suggest, but let's be honest, you're not exactly excited to test that theory. So, you get dressed, scratch your neck again, and step out into the damp morning air. Your tunic clings to you, heavy with sweat and grime. The bugs are awake, flying around your face, landing on your arms. But there's no time to think about comfort. The fields await, and the sun is rising. It's time to get to work. And for you, work is about to mean something very different than typing emails or making to-do lists. You step outside, the cold morning air hitting your face, but it doesn't wake you up in the least. It just makes you shiver. Your tunic clings damply to your skin, the wool holding yesterday's sweat together with today's. The sky is still gray, the sun barely peeking through low clouds. But there's no time to dawdle. You have work to do, the kind of work that's unaffected by weather, mood, or health. There's no office, there's no desk, there's no inbox to check. Your job is simple: don't die trying to stay alive. You're a peasant, like about 90% of people in medieval Europe. Your life revolves around the land, sweat, and hoping that this year's harvest doesn't fail. You don't own the land. It belongs to the local lord, a man who may not remember your name but certainly remembers to collect your taxes. Today's work is like any other, laboring until your back aches like it's been bent in half. You pick up the most rudimentary tools: a wooden hoe, worn smooth from years of use, a sickle, rusty on the edges, maybe a shovel, the handle patched with rope where it broke last winter. No Home Depot will replace these tools. You fix them yourself or borrow from a neighbor, barter, or give them eggs if you have no other choice. Some historians argue that farmers didn't always work as relentlessly as we think. They point to church holidays, festival days, and breaks for religious celebrations. But recent research into medieval farm calendars shows that despite these breaks, most farmers worked from dawn to dusk, 6 days a week, especially during planting and harvesting seasons. You don't have a clock, but nature does. You go to the fields. The path is muddy, the grass wet with dew or last night's rain. Your feet slip on rocks, your knees are sore, and you haven't even started. By the time you reach the edge of the field, your hands are dirty, your stomach is growling, but there's no time for a snack. Breakfast is the main meal. There won't be anything else until sunset, and even then, you're not sure it will taste any better than this one. You start by pulling weeds. That means bending down, pulling out stubborn roots, thorns and bushes scratching your hands. No gloves. You work barehanded, the dirt worn under your nails, skin peeling where calluses used to be. Sometimes you spot a worm and think, at least the soil is alive. Other times you wonder if the soil is hungrier than you. Next, you sow the seeds. Barley, rye, maybe oats if your village has done its crop rotation right this year. Forget vegetables, grains were life. If the harvest failed, you faced starvation, and not just for yourself. You paid your taxes in crops, not in coins. The Lord expected his share, and if you didn't meet your quota, you were forced to work or face punishment. Sometimes fines, sometimes shackles, sometimes worse. Historians still debate the true extent of feudal oppression. Some argue that peasants had more freedom than legend has it, even owning small plots of land. Others point to countless records of taxes, tithes, and levies that left peasants barely subsistence. Archaeological digs have revealed malnutrition in the bones of medieval villagers, evidence that life on the land was far from ideal. You keep working. Dig ditches to drain the fields, carrying buckets of water to seedlings that look like they would rather die than grow. There is no irrigation system, no sprinklers, just sore arms, aching backs, and the hope that the weather will always be right, not too dry, not too wet. You glance at your neighbors. They are doing the same thing you are. Men, women, children, everyone is working. Children as young as 5 are carrying baskets of weeds or small rocks. There are no schools for them. Education is for monks and nobles, not peasants. Your sons will follow in your footsteps. Your daughters will do the same. Plus, breed more peasants who will repeat the cycle. If you are a woman, your days are even busier. After working in the fields, you still have to cook, clean, spin wool, mend clothes, and care for children. There is no nursery, no grocery store, no breaks. Some scholars argue that medieval women had more autonomy than we think, managing households and even running businesses in towns. But here, in the fields, there was no escape from the hard work. You had to work until you were exhausted, then do it again. The sun was rising, but you barely noticed. There were no watches on your wrists, no clocks in sheaves of wheat and twine. The stalks rub against your hands, leaving itchy, burning red marks. Your mouth is dry, but the water in the jug is warm and tastes like the inside of an old leather boot. You drink it anyway, because dehydration is worse. If you're lucky, there's a communal ox in the village, shared by families to help plow the land. If not, you dig by hand. One ox can change a harvest. Without one, your workload triples. Some say medieval villages cooperated, helping each other to survive. Others say life was harsher, neighbors competing for scarce resources. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, cooperative when possible, desperate when necessary. The sun is starting to set in the sky, but the work isn't done. There's always something else to do: mending a fence, patching a roof, chasing a runaway chicken. Your body is tired, your hands are numb, but you don't stop. You can't stop. There's no safety net, no pension, no retirement. Your job is to work until you can't anymore. And then, when you finally make it back to your hut after a long day in the fields, there's still more to endure. The weather, sickness, and hunger will continue to test you. But for now, you've made it through the hardest part of the day, at least until tomorrow. The sun is starting to sink toward the horizon, but the day isn't over yet. In fact, the hardest part is still waiting for you back home. You trudge down the muddy path, your feet heavy, your spine aching, your hands raw. There's no cool shower to wash away the sweat, no comfortable chair to rest on. You've returned to the one-room shack you left that morning, and it smells exactly as you'd woken up, like damp wool, smoke and livestock, and people who haven't bathed in weeks, maybe months. Inside, the fire is smoldering, blanketing the shack in a thick gray fog. Your eyes sting, but no one has thought to ventilate in 1325. There's a hole in the roof to let the smoke out, but most of it just drifts around the room, coating the wooden beams in a thick layer of soot. Some historians believe that this layer of soot actually helped preserve medieval houses by keeping out insects. Others believe it was simply a side effect of cooking indoors over an open fire without a chimney. Your stomach growls again, but dinner is no different than breakfast. Another bowl of soup, thicker because the water is boiled more after a long day. The same mysterious stew, the same stale bread, the same vague feeling that something small and furry had nibbled at it while you were out. But you eat anyway, because there's nothing else. You sit by the fire, blowing gently on a spoonful of soup. The flickering light casts long shadows on the walls, highlighting every crack and cobweb. You can hear the crackling of wood, the distant bleating of a goat, and the soft whispers of your neighbors through the thin walls. Privacy is not part of your life. In fact, it barely existed as a concept. The medieval family was a communal affair. Parents, children, extended family, sometimes even servants and visitors all shared the same space. Sleeping quarters were equally cramped. You might share a straw mattress with a sibling, a spouse, or the family dog. Some nights, you didn't even notice the fleas because you were too busy trying not to roll in the cold ashes of the fire pit. There was no evening entertainment, no Netflix, no bedtime phone scrolling. But people still told stories. Someone might tell a local legend or repeat jokes you'd heard 100 times. Laughter came easily in the dark, partly because it was the only thing you could do to feel human after a day like this. Sometimes, traveling musicians stopped by, singing ballads about brave knights or tragic lovers, but you know those stories aren't really about you. You'll never ride into battle or rescue a maiden from a tower. You're too busy making sure the goats don't eat the cabbage patch. You might think of taking a bath as a way to relax, but remember, baths were rare. Not because people didn't like cleanliness, but because water was dangerous. In medieval times, bathing too often could lead to infection of the pores. Some historians believe that this fear of water contributed to centuries of dirt. Others believe that ancient people did bathe, just not in the way we do today. They might wipe themselves with a damp towel or wash their hands and faces at a well. As for a full immersion, that was for special occasions or emergencies. And even if you did want to bathe, you had to draw buckets of water from the well, boil it over a fire, and pour it into a wooden tub. Luckily, you got to bathe first. Then the water was used by the whole family. By the time it reached the last person, it was no cleaner than the dirt outside. So instead of bathing, you scratch your skin, trying to ignore the tiny fleas crawling up your arms. Scratching is a part of life now. You go to bed in the same clothes you wore to work. No pajamas, no fur coat, just a damp, rough tunic that sticks to your back in all the wrong places. At night, the cold seeps into your bones. There is no central heating. The fire might keep the main room warm for a few hours, but by midnight, the coals die out. Winter is worse, of course. In summer, you sweat all night. But in winter, you shiver under a single wool blanket that hasn't been washed since last year. Some families keep animals indoors at night, not just for safety, but to keep warm. The cow in the corner. That's your medieval hearth. As you drift off to sleep, you think about tomorrow. It'll be the same, a day of labor, a day of hoping for good weather, a day of scratching rashes and eating bread tough enough to stop a crossbow bolt. You don't dream of climbing the social ladder because it's not for you. You're a peasant, born where you are. You're here to stay. Historians still debate how aware medieval peasants were of their own oppression. Some say people accepted their role as part of God's plan. Others believe they secretly resented the system but knew better than to rebel. Rebellions did happen from time to time. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 is a famous example, but they usually ended in disaster. Feudalism was designed to keep you where you are tired, hungry, and busy. Before you close your eyes, you mumble a prayer. Not necessarily because you're religious, but because everyone else is, and because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't pray. The church controls everything from your schedule to the afterlife. Miss a prayer, and you risk eternal damnation. Hell isn't a metaphor here. It's real. The priests describe it in vivid detail: rivers of fire, demons with pitchforks, and lakes of boiling blood. So you pray. For your family, for a bountiful harvest, for no plague this year, and maybe, quietly, to change something. But mostly, you pray to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. Your eyes are closed, the room is dark, the fire is flickering, and your body is heavier than it was this morning. You've survived another day in medieval Europe, just barely. Sleep comes, but not peacefully. You toss and turn on your straw mattress, each movement greeted by the rustling of dry grass or the scurrying of some small creature, a mouse, perhaps, or just your imagination. Your skin itches from the fleas that share your bed. They don't care if you're tired, they're hungry too. All around you, the sounds of the medieval night resonate. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows early, confused by the moonlight. A child cries in a nearby hut, its mother whispering a prayer. Outside, a dog barks once and then falls silent, perhaps frightened by the shadows moving near the fields. In the distance, you hear the church bells, one of those rare technologies that transcend the boundaries of every village. The bells call you to prayer, to the hours, and sometimes to death. You wake up several times during the night. As usual, no melatonin supplements, no blackout curtains, no white noise machines. Just the fitful sleep of a body that never really rested. Medieval nights weren't for peaceful dreams. They were for worries. About the harvest, about disease, about whatever might be crawling beneath your feet right now. When dawn finally comes, you leave your straw bed, your joints stiff, your eyes stinging. You haven't had a good night's sleep in months, years. But that's normal. Medieval life didn't come with REM cycles and 8 hours of sleep. People slept in stages, waking in the middle of the night to tend the fire, pray, or check on animals. Historians still debate whether this biphasic sleep was healthier or just another medieval necessity. Some say it was natural, others call it another side effect of living in survival mode. Today, like yesterday, you're out before the sun is fully up. The morning air is cold and damp. Dew coats the grass, soaking your bare feet before you've taken 5 steps. If you're lucky, you'll avoid stepping on anything unpleasant. Animal droppings are everywhere because hygiene is, well, nothing to write home about. Your front yard is also your bathroom. Remember that chamber pot from yesterday? It's still there, waiting to be emptied into the street. Or maybe you'll throw the contents out the window again, shouting the medieval warning. Guard-a-loo so no one gets caught off guard. Most of the streets in the village are open sewers. Rain is your garbage. You hope the water washes it all away before the stench becomes too strong. But in the summer, when the sun burns the garbage into the ground, the stench becomes part of the air you breathe. Some historians argue that medieval towns weren't as dirty as we imagine. They point to laws about street cleanliness and fines for littering. But others point out that these laws existed because people consistently ignored them. You're hungry, but breakfast isn't anything new. It's just another pot of soup reheated, thicker and lumpier this time. The same stew has been simmering for weeks, maybe months. You scoop a spoon into the wooden bowl, picking out a twig that somehow made its way into the pot. There's also bread, Still hard enough to block a sword, you dip it in the soup to soften it, knowing full well that you might be eating mold, but you also know that you will get scurvy if you don't eat something. So you take the risk. Some people around you believe in food superstitions. Maybe eating a certain herb will keep you from getting sick. Maybe a pinch of salt will ward off evil spirits. But salt is expensive, sometimes kept as treasure. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, basically. They are magic items for the rich, worth more than their weight in gold. For you, the spice of life is onions, leeks, and hope. After breakfast, you go to work again. But today's work is not in the fields, it's in the woods. You need wood because winter is coming, and without fuel, you will freeze to death. But gathering wood is a risky business. The woods do not belong to you, they belong to the Lord. Technically, it was illegal to pick up fallen branches unless you had permission, and permission usually came with a tax. Still, you did it because no one wanted to freeze to death. You glanced back as you picked up the wood, hoping the Lord's men hadn't seen. Getting caught meant punishment, and punishments in the medieval world were rarely light. Maybe a fine, maybe shackles, or worse. You carried the wood back to your hut, your muscles burning. Your hands were numb again. But that wasn't new. Medieval life turned your body into a tool that would break down long before retirement age. By 25, you might have a limp. By 35, your teeth would start falling out. By 40, if you lived to be that old, you would be considered old-fashioned. Historians sometimes argue about the average lifespan, but most agree if you survive childhood, you're unlikely to grow old. You stop by the village well to get water, but you don't drink it without thinking. The water is dangerous. It looks clean. But you know better. Someone might have washed a bloody cloth in it this morning, or an animal might have drowned in it last week. That's why you like beer, even if it's lukewarm, weak, and watery. A little bit of it keeps you alive. Water. What a gamble. By midday, you're hungry again. But there's no lunch break. You work until sunset, maybe even longer if there's moonlight. Rest is not a reward, it's a rare accident. You have no free time. Every minute you sit still is a minute you could be gathering firewood, tending crops, or patching a hole in the roof. When you finally trudge back to your hut in the evening, you're so tired you forget to notice the fleas. Your skin itches, your legs ache, and your head is heavy with the same thought as yesterday trying to get through another day. And tomorrow you'll do the same. Night falls again. But tonight a storm is brewing. The wind picks up, pushing cold air through the cracks in the walls. The roof is thatched straw tied together with rope, and it leaks when it rains hard. Drops of water fall on your forehead as you lie on the straw, and you sigh at how this happens every time. You pull the rough wool blanket higher, knowing it won't help much. Wet wool is just as itchy as dry wool, only heavier. Outside, the village is dark. There are no streetlights, no lanterns in the windows. Only the faint glow of moonlight when the clouds part, and the flickering flames of a few scattered cooking fires. The medieval night is truly dark. Not dark like a city, but so dark you can't see your hands. Instead, you listen. The patter of rain on the roof, the wind whistling through the cracks in the door. Somewhere, an owl calls. Somewhere, a dog growls softly in its throat. You try to sleep, but your mind keeps wandering. Your life is about more than farming and foraging. It is about survival in a world where danger lurks everywhere. Not just from hunger or disease, but from other people. Violence creeps into everyday life. You've seen it before. A neighbor is beaten for stealing bread. A woman accused of witchcraft is tied to a chair and drowned in a river. The concept of law and order exists, but it's not the same as modern justice. Punishment is a public event. It's not about fairness. It's about making an example. There's no police force, no due process. If someone accuses you of theft or blasphemy, you might be dragged before the local lord or the village mayor. Sometimes they settled the matter by trial, but trial in the 1300s had a very different meaning. It could mean dipping your hand in boiling water to pick up a stone. If your hand healed within 3 days, congratulations, you were innocent. If it festered, the infection was seen as a judgment from God. Historians still debate how often these extreme trials actually occurred. Some believe they were rare, ritual events. Others say they were so common that they were a constant source of fear. Either way, you knew the risks. Just looking at the wrong person could cost you your stock or worse. And then there is the church. Religion is not just something you do on Sunday. It is the basis of your reality. You measure time by the church bells. You pay taxes to the church. You confess your sins to avoid hell. But the church is not always gentle. If you question a priest, you risk being labeled a heretic. If you are a woman with too much knowledge of herbal medicine, people might start whispering the word witch. Tonight, lying in the dark, you think about the sins you may have committed today. Did you gossip? Did you covet your neighbor's cow? Did you forget to pray before meals? These are small things, but in the medieval mind, they carried weight. The fear of hell was not theoretical, it was real. Priests described it vividly: rivers of fire, gnashing of teeth, endless suffering. If hunger does not kill you, sin will. Lightning flashes outside, illuminating the wooden beams of your ceiling for just a second. You remember the stories of storms being signs of God's wrath. Maybe someone in the village did something terrible today. Maybe the storm was theirs, or maybe it was you. You close your eyes, but sleep is fitful. Dreams come in waves, often filled with strange images: flooded fields, dead cattle, lords collecting taxes until nothing is left. Your subconscious, like your conscious mind, is preoccupied with survival. When dawn finally comes, you don't feel rested. You never feel rested. You roll out of bed, or rather, you roll out of the hay and stretch your aching limbs. Today, you're still alive. That counts as a victory. Breakfast is the same as always. Soup, bread, a sip of light beer. But today, a rumor spreads through the village: the Lord's men are coming to collect taxes. You immediately tense up because you know what that means. A visit from the tax collector is like a medieval version of a failed audit, except instead of paperwork, you might lose your livestock. Taxes aren't paid in coins because you don't have any. You have to pay in grain, eggs, or labor. Some years, the harvest is bountiful enough to cover the cost. Other years, like this one, you're less sure. You might have to give up your winter's seed, risking famine in the spring. Or you might have to work overtime on the Lord's estate days you'd rather spend tending your little plot of land. Some historians argue that medieval peasants weren't as miserable as we think. They had festivals, feasts, and a sense of community. But when it came to taxes, no one was happy. You live in a system designed to keep you in your place. Born poor, die poor. That's the problem. As the day begins, you watch men on horseback sweep the dirt roads for dust. The Lord's steward arrives with a scroll and a list of what each family owes. You might offer him a chicken, hoping to appease him. But bribery is risky. If he gets angry, he might double your quota instead of reducing it. You spend the rest of the morning scraping together whatever is left: a sack of barley, a few onions, maybe a piece of cloth you plan to use to patch your tunic. Everything has a price, and today you're paying for the right to exist on land you will never own. As the sun reaches its zenith, the tax collectors finally arrive. Their horses snort and stomp their feet, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. You bow your head. You don't look them in the eye. You hand them your goods and thank them, because that's what you have to do, even if you only give them half of what you need to survive the winter. And then they're gone, leaving a cloud of dust behind. You stare at the empty spot where your food used to be and tell yourself you'll figure it out. You always do. But deep down, you know the truth. The system wasn't built for you to win. It was built for you to suffer. The dust from the king's horses has barely settled before you return to work. There's no time to think about what you have lost, for if you stop too long, the fields will take it all from you. Nature is not generous, and neither is the calendar. The planting season does not stop for your feelings. Plants do not water themselves. Your life is a series of chores, each tied to survival, repeated until your hands forget what it feels like to rest. You trudge back to the vegetable garden, inspect the wilting cabbages, bend down to pull weeds, your spine cracking with each movement. Somewhere nearby, a child coughs, a reminder that illness is always lurking. After all, medieval medicine was less about cures and more about prayers and guesses. There was no theory of germs yet. People believed that illness came from polluted air, imbalances in secretions, or divine punishment. Some tried herbs, others bloodletting or leeches. Most just hoped for the best. You glance at your neighbor's hut, where smoke curls lazily from the fire. You recall that last winter, his wife died of what they called the sweating sickness. No one really knows what caused it. Historians still debate the true nature of the illness today. Some say it was a form of influenza, others say it was a mysterious medieval plague that disappeared. All you know is that she went to bed with a fever and never woke up. It's a common story. The reality of death is everywhere. You're always aware of the thin line between life and cold. You've seen friends disappear from the worsening cough. You've seen babies wrapped in cloth and buried by candlelight. Their names barely whispered because everyone knows there will be more funerals soon. And yet, somehow, life goes on. You head to the communal oven with a small loaf of bread, your weekly contribution to the village's baking schedule. Baking together because wood is precious, and the clay oven takes hours to heat. Families share space, carrying dough in baskets, marking each loaf with a family crest so there's no confusion about whose rock-hard barley brick is whose. As you walk, you pass familiar faces you've seen every day of your life. The blacksmith is hammering away at something you don't quite understand. The cooper is repairing a cracked barrel. The tanner is working in a cloud of foul smoke, because tanning involves soaking leather in animal urine and other substances you don't want to think about when you're handling food. The town smells like this all the time: smoke, sweat, dung, and leather. You're used to it. Your nose stopped complaining years ago. You nod to each other but say little. People here don't gossip about dreams or hobbies. You talk about the weather, the food, and the latest diseases that are spreading. You might mention that Brother Martin's cow gave birth to twins. That's big news. Or you whisper about the merchant who passed through last week, bringing rumors of war in some kingdom you'll never visit. By the time you reach the oven, your back hurts so much you wonder if you're slowly becoming part of the earth. You hand over the loaf, dust the flour off your shirt, and trudge back to the hut. La société. Inside, your family is preparing dinner. Dinner is, once again, a gray stew. A few wilted greens float in the pot. Luckily, there might be turnips. Meat is out of the question. That's yesterday's tax money. You chew slowly, partly for enjoyment, partly because your teeth are no longer what they used to be. Medieval dental care, well, didn't exist. Toothaches could be fatal if they got infected. There were no dentists. The local barber could pull your tooth with an iron forceps, but no anesthetic. The red and white striped barber's pole. It wasn't just for cutting hair. It represented the blood and bandages from the medical procedures performed right there on that chair. Haircut or surgery. Choose one or both. After dinner, the sky turns pink, then purple, then black. Another day passes, another night begins. But don't think that means you'll sleep peacefully. There's always the risk of a raid. Bandits lurk outside the village, waiting for the moment when the guards are distracted or the Lord's men are absent. The world outside your town is not safe. Travel is dangerous, the roads are unguarded, and justice is slow or non-existent. Historians often debate how violent medieval life really was. Some say crime was rampant, others say small villages had their own systems for keeping the peace. Either way, you sleep with one ear open to the sound of footsteps that don't belong somewhere. You can hear the priest chanting in Latin, his voice echoing across the fields from the church. You don't understand the words. Only the priests and scholars speak Latin. You only know the rhythm, the solemn tone, the promise of heaven whispered into the night air. Somewhere in the village, a woman is delivering a baby by candlelight. It's a dangerous moment for both mother and child. 1 in 3 women die in childbirth. If the baby survives, half the village gathers to pour water over its head in a baptism, not just as a welcome to life but as a protection from death. Because if the baby doesn't survive the first few weeks, at least its soul will be saved. That's how you think of life here, not in years, but in milestones. When you return to your bed, a flat pile of straw. Really, you stare at the wooden beams above you, counting the knots. There's no pillow, just a folded piece of cloth. Your bones ache from the day's work, but your mind is busy. You think about the coming winter, about the dwindling food supply, about the taxes you paid today and whether you'll have any left for tomorrow. And yet, even in this moment, lying in the dark, you understand why people still find ways to laugh, sing, tell stories. Because without those things, the burden of this life would be too much to bear. You close your eyes, hoping the roof won't leak again tonight, hoping the rats won't chew through the grain, most of all, hoping that tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all over again. Dawn comes again. Not with the sound of an alarm clock, but with the sound of church bells echoing across the fields. You open your eyes to see the familiar beams of the hut's ceiling, still intact after last night's storm. The smell of smoke, sweat, and damp straw greets you as usual. Your back aches, your legs stiffen, and your stomach is already rumbling. Another day in the medieval world has begun. You sit up, brushing the dry grass from your tunic, and notice that your feet are still covered in yesterday's mud. You wipe them off half-heartedly, knowing that they will be just as filthy when night falls. Hygiene, in your time, was not so much about cleanliness as it was about survival. Medieval people believed that bathing too often was dangerous. Some said it weakened the body's immune system. Others said it opened the pores for disease. Historians still debate whether medieval people were actually dirty or just following their best advice. Either way, you won't be scrubbing this morning. Instead, you shuffle over to the pot, lift the lid, and find the stew still simmering from last night. It's a little thicker now, a little grayer, but it's food. You dip a piece of stale bread into the sauce, softening it enough to chew with your aching teeth. You think about those who say laughter is the best medicine. Maybe that's true, because food certainly isn't. As you eat, you overhear a conversation outside. The local lord is holding court today. That means disputes will be settled, debts collected, and punishments meted out. You consider going to watch not because you have a case to present, but because it's one of the few forms of entertainment left. Medieval justice was a spectacle of fairness. People gathered in the town square not only to witness the verdicts, but also to see who was put in stocks, who was fined, and who might lose a hand for theft. You finished your meal and joined the crowd near the manor. The Lord Steward sat on a raised platform, parchment in hand, calling out names. People came forward to settle petty disputes, disagreements over boundaries, accusations of borrowing tools and not returning them, complaints about wild pigs eating the crop. There was no police force to investigate, no forensic science to check fingerprints. Your word was against your neighbor's, and often the Lord would side with whoever brought the biggest gift or the best bribe. Today, a young man is accused of stealing a goose. The punishment can be harsh, maybe a flogging, maybe public humiliation. Sometimes, for repeat offenders, the punishment is even harsher. In some towns, stealing cattle can mean losing an ear. That way, everyone knows what you did every time they see you. The villagers watch silently as the Lord makes his decision. His judgment is final. There are no appeals, no lawyers to argue. Justice here is swift, sometimes cruel, and almost always biased toward the powerful. You shift, feeling your wooden clogs clamp down on your feet. If you're lucky enough to have shoes, they're usually made of leather or hardwood, with no padding, no soles designed for comfort. Most of the time, you walk barefoot, careful to step over mud, dung, and sharp rocks. No wonder half the villagers limp. After the trial is over, you return to your daily chores, fixing fences, patching roofs, checking rabbit traps you set last night. Technically, hunting is illegal unless you have permission from the Lord, but sometimes small game goes undetected, unless you get caught. Then you go back to court, and maybe back to the barn. As you work, you notice a monk walking along the road. His robes are brown, tied at the waist with a rope. He carries a sack containing something you can't quite make out. Monks are a rare sight, but they play an important role in your world. They copy books, care for the sick, and sometimes give advice. But they are also the keepers of knowledge, knowledge that you will never have access to because you can't read. Most of the people in your village are illiterate. Reading is reserved for monks, priests, and occasionally noble children who have private tutors. Books are hand-copied, expensive, and rare. The Bible exists, but in Latin, a language you will never understand. Some historians believe that the church liked it that way, controlling knowledge, making the common people dependent on the clergy to act. As the day wore on, you stopped to sip beer because the water was unsafe. Remember the streams? They still carried waste from upstream. So you drank small beer, almost alcohol-free, but boiled during the brewing process, making it safer than plain water. Even the kids drank. No one was happy about it, but everyone came to drink it. And by the end of the afternoon, you and everyone else had gathered to repair a section of the village fence that had fallen in the storm last night. Cooperation was necessary because if the sheep went astray, it wasn't just one person's problem, it was everyone's. The community worked together, but not always out of kindness. It was about survival. If the fence was broken, the wolf might come, and you've seen what the wolf can do to a flock or to a person. The wind picks up again, carrying the scent of rain and damp earth. You glance at the sky, knowing you have to hurry. There's no weather app to check the forecast. You read the clouds, the wind, the behavior of animals. Some villagers believe in signs the way birds fly, the way your joints ache before a storm. Superstition is a part of everyday life. Is it absurd? Maybe. But when life is this fragile, you cling to whatever knowledge you can find. As the sun sets, you finish your repairs and head home. Your hands ache, your back aches, and your legs feel like logs. Dinner will be the same as usual, but tonight you're too tired to care. You think of monks writing manuscripts somewhere in a stone monastery. You think of the Lord in his manor, counting his taxes, and you think of yourself, here in the mud, living a life that no history book has ever written, but somehow you find the energy to laugh at a joke your neighbor tells. A silly story about a goose and a drunken priest. You don't even remember the joke. It doesn't matter. Laughter feels good. Like a small rebellion against everything heavy in your life. And for a moment, just a moment, you feel human again. Night has fallen again, shrouding the village in darkness so thick you can barely see your hand in front of your face. There are no streetlights, no lighted windows, just the occasional candle if someone is wealthy enough to buy one. Most people go to bed when the sun comes up, because staying up late means burning up irreplaceable resources. But tonight, you can't sleep yet. There's a gathering near the village chapel, a vigil for a holiday. The church calendar dictates your life holidays, fasts, saints' days. You don't have a personal calendar or planner on the wall. You know what day it is based on what the priest says after Mass. You put on your robe, a rough sweater that smells of smoke and old sweat, and walk with your neighbors toward the chapel. The dirt road is rough underfoot, slippery from the rain. Someone in front of you stumbles but laughs it off. Stumbling is a part of life here. You hope you don't break any bones, because even a broken bone can easily be a death sentence. Inside the chapel, the air is thick with the scent of incense. The priest chants in Latin, his voice echoing off the stone walls. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm is familiar. You kneel when people kneel. Cross yourself when they kneel. You stare at the stained glass windows reflecting the pale moonlight, imagining saints and angels looking down at you. Religion is both a comfort and a terror. On the one hand, it gives you structure in life. On the other, it fills your mind with the fear of eternal punishment. The church tells you that sin is everywhere in your thoughts, in your laziness, even in your dreams. There's no escaping the idea that you could fall into hell at any moment. Some people think of heaven when they kneel. Others think about food, about debt, about survival. You think about your roof and whether the wind will tear it off again this winter. After prayer, you return to your hut under a sky full of stars. There is no light pollution, no glaring neon signs to obscure your view. The medieval sky is clear and cold, and you wonder if that is the sky everyone is staring at, from kings in their castles to beggars in the gutters. You crawl back onto the straw mattress, shifting to find a comfortable position. Sleep won't come easily, because tomorrow brings another challenge preparing for winter. In medieval times, winter wasn't just a season, it was an enemy. You planned for it months in advance, stockpiling whatever food you could to keep it from spoiling. You'd smoked some fish, dried some herbs, packed roots into underground cellars, but you knew it wasn't enough. Never enough. There was no central heating, no insulation. Your home was a leaky hut, and when the first frost hit, you'd be shivering for months. Firewood was precious if you didn't have enough. You'd burn whatever you could find sometimes, even the furniture. You remembered how last year a neighbor had burned down his own door to keep his family warm. Then he just hangs a blanket over the door and prays for the best. You stare at the ceiling, thinking about the cold nights ahead. Historians still debate how people survived the medieval winters without modern conveniences. Some say community was the key, families huddled together, keeping warm. Others believe people simply accepted suffering as a part of life. You begin to think both answers are true. Your body aches in the places you expected: shoulders, knees, lower back. The pain is persistent but normal here, like hunger or fatigue. No one talks about chronic illness because everyone gets it. There's no concept of self-care, just get through the day. You finally drift off into a light sleep, only to wake up before dawn. The church bells ring, signaling another day of work and prayer. This time, your mission is to help repair the village fence, the wooden fence that protects your home from bandits and wild animals. Everyone who can muster pitches in. You hammer stakes into the ground, your hands blistered and scratched. You smear lard on your cuts because there is no ointment, bandage, or antibiotic. You hope the wound doesn't turn black. The work is hard and dangerous. One wrong move with the mallet and you could break a finger. If that happens, you wrap it in a cloth and keep working. Rest is not an option when the village needs protecting. As you work, someone tells you a story about a nearby village that was raided last month. The bandits burned houses, stole livestock, and took whatever they could carry. This happens more often than people like to admit. The roads are in chaos, patrolled only by wolves and thieves. What do you think you would do if the bandits came tonight? Hide in the vegetable cellar trying to fight with a wooden pitchfork, hoping they'll pass over your hut because it looks too shabby to bother with. By midday, the fence is patched up at least enough to last another week. You wipe the sweat from your brow, tasting salt and dirt. You're hungry again, but you'll wait until dinner. There's no lunch break, just the shared understanding that everyone's stomachs are growling too. Then, as the sun dips toward the horizon, you gather around a communal fire. Someone plays a lute, the strings softly echoing through the air. A few people sing, their voices hoarse, tired but determined to find joy in the monotony. You join in because the melody is familiar, like the steady pulse of survival. You laugh when someone tells a joke about a monk, a pig, and a barrel of mead. It's not a clever joke, but the laughter is rare enough to feel sacred. As the sky darkens, you crawl back to your hut for the last time of the day. The cycle repeats itself: sleep, wake, work, pray, worry, survive. It's not glamorous, and it's not easy, but it's life. Your life. And somehow, you'll do it all again tomorrow. Tonight, as you lie down on the straw, your body sinks deeper into the familiar ache of exhaustion. Your stomach rumbles with the lingering hunger you've learned to ignore. You listen to the sounds of the village slowly fading away. The wind sighs softly through the cracks in the walls, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Someone in the distance coughs a sharp, hoarse cough that echoes too long in the cold air. You pull your cloak tighter, huddled, trying to find a small amount of warmth beneath the itchy wool. You stare at the ceiling, your eyes tracing the lines of the wooden beams above. The same beams you've seen every night of your life. The same dark corners where shadows gather. Your mind drifts to thoughts of the day ahead. What chores will come? More fields to tend. More repairs. Maybe the cattle will escape, forcing you to chase sheep through the mud. Someone might fall ill, and the village would whisper about curses and bad air. It always did. You think of the world outside your village, the places you'll never see, castles and kings, knights in armor, strange lands told by wandering minstrels. But for you, none of that exists. Your life is here, in the mud and cold, with familiar faces, familiar prayers, and endless chores. Yet there's a strange comfort in routine, a rhythm, like the ticking of a clock, if you had one. Historians still debate whether medieval people actually believed the legends they told each other at night. Were tales of dragons and fairies just entertainment? Or did people really think the jungle was inhabited by such creatures? You don't know. You've never seen a dragon, but you've seen people act like beasts. And that's scary enough. As you close your eyes, you think about the balance between fear and hope. The church tells you to fear sin, to fear hell, to fear God's wrath, but it also tells you to hope for heaven, to believe that, after this life of mud and hunger, something better awaits you. You hold on to that thought because it's all you have. You whisper a small prayer, not because you're particularly religious, but because everyone else is and you don't want to risk it. Your muscles twitch as sleep begins to pull you down. You shift slightly, trying to find a spot on the mattress that won't be poked by the straw. Outside, night insects buzz. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots a soft, mournful sound that carries through the village like a lullaby. You think about how small your world is. 10 miles in any direction is like the boundary of existence. You will live your whole life within that circle. Birth, work, sickness, death, all are confined to the muddy streets, the crumbling walls, the old faces beside you. And yet, you find meaning here. You love your family. You share laughter when you can. You survive because you have no choice. Your thoughts fade as sleep finally comes, heavy and slow. Your breathing deepens, matching the gentle rhythm of the wind outside. The fire in the fireplace dies down, casting pale orange rays on the walls. The village rests. In this moment, there is no need to worry about tomorrow. No need to think about hunger, work, or the fear of winter. You are warm enough now. You are safe now. Your heart slows. Your mind quiets. You drift into a peaceful sleep, lulled by the hum of night sounds and the gentle promise of rest. And now, let your body sink even deeper. The story is over, but your rest has only just begun. Feel the weight of the blankets wrapped around you, soft and comforting. Notice the way your breath rises and falls, slow and steady, like the rhythm of distant waves. There is no need to hold on to any thoughts right now. Let them drift away. Like leaves drifting down a gentle stream. Imagine yourself in a peaceful, serene place. Maybe it is a meadow under the stars, or a warm little house away from the wind. Imagine a gentle breeze brushing against your skin, carrying the scent of rain and earth. You have nothing to do. There are no tasks waiting, no footsteps approaching. Just you, resting. Let your muscles relax completely. From your forehead down to your shoulders, your arms, your hands. Let your back soften. Let your feet sink into the mattress beneath you. Every part of you is at peace now. The night carries you away, gently, like a lullaby from long ago. The past, the present, and the worries of today fade into silence. Your breathing is still slow, peaceful, and even. You are safe here. You are warm. You have made it through another day, and now there is only rest ahead. Sleep well, dream gently, and let go.